Hey everyone, it's Gordon here, back with another episode of the Public Health Insight Podcast. And this episode, I'll be continuing our conversation based on a lecture series that myself and LaShawn, who's not able to join this podcast, delivered to the MPH students at Western University this year in 2024, based on our 9 lessons learned since completing our MPH degree in, what would it have been, 2019? Yeah, 2019, I think so. And the purpose of that was to do exactly that, just showcase how we've grown since that time period and some things that we may have believed would have turned out one way but ended up being different to what we expected, and to be able to synthesize and share that in a way that that cohort of MPH students could easily digest. Now, this episode will focus on lesson 5, which is knowing your worth. But in the previous episodes, we touched on lesson 1, making the most of your MPH when you're still in it, of course. Lesson 2 was about getting your first job is a big step, a pretty big deal, something you should celebrate after getting your MPH. The third lesson was around how to stand out at your workplace and ways that you could go about doing that or not. And the fourth was around the idea that learning and professional development doesn't stop. The idea that you're not going to be fully equipped having gone through an academic program, and there's some learning that still needs to happen even after that. And that all takes us now to lesson 5 of 9, which is around knowing your worth. So what does that really mean?
You're listening to the Public Health Insight Podcast, your go-to space for all things public health and global health, from the Sustainable Development Goals to the social determinants of health, as well as interesting dialogues about the diverse career opportunities that exist in these fields. Remember to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify so other people like you can benefit from our content.
So as far as I'm concerned, knowing your worth is key in terms of your overall psychological well-being, right? So the idea here is that even if you're getting paid enough to cover your expenses, your bills, your travel, your way of life, in a sense, it's natural to compare yourself to other people still. Other people doing the same work as you in the same company, or other people doing work that's similar enough in a different company, and seeing how you stack up against others in that regard. It's also normal, on the other hand, to feel like the time and effort that you spend to grow professionally, to grow your understanding of the subject matter that you work in, to grow your knowledge, should also be accompanied by an increase in monetary compensation, benefits, or other equivalent perks. It's natural to feel that way. A lot of times we get the whole money conversation wrong, though. And I'm going to point us to the Herzberg theory. And this is the idea that employee satisfaction has 2 main dimensions, one being hygiene and the other being motivation. In the context that we're talking about now, money is often wrongly seen as on the motivation dimension when it's actually in the hygiene dimension. And the idea here is that things like salary, income, compensation work towards decreasing an employee's satisfaction with their work environment, right? And then motivators are more like getting praise, recognition, can make you feel like you want to work harder and keep going, right? So it's not that money is a motivating factor in that it makes you feel the need to put in more effort and extra effort proportional to the increasing pay that you might get. It's more that you get demotivated or more dissatisfied when the money doesn't currently meet your expectations. And that's kind of the key problem here in this whole idea of knowing your worth. Do you have an idea for a topic you want us to cover or any questions you want to ask us? There's a cool new feature that you can use wherever you are in the world, which allows you to instantly send us a text message at no cost to you. All you have to do is open the full episode description in whatever platform you're listening from and follow the instructions at the very bottom. We'll be sure to give you a shout out in the next episode that we record. Now back to the podcast. What I've experienced personally and what I've learned in conversations with many other colleagues of mine is that there is a real difficulty in experiencing significant salary growth when you're actually staying in the same position at the same organization. The biggest growth opportunities salary-wise tends to happen when you're taking on more responsibility, taking on a different role that comes with more responsibility, often a leadership position or a more highly sought after technical skill, for example, that makes that position harder to come by, or those sets of skills harder to come by, or by leaving the organization, whether it's for a similar position and that organization has more resources and happens to pay a bit more, or they potentially value your skills more in the context of the work that they do and are therefore willing to pay more money. But the overall idea here is that in general, you often have more negotiation power when you're joining a new company. And that power usually decreases over time, having stayed in that same company for a longer period of time. And then you kind of get it back when you look to move elsewhere. The conventional wisdom tells us that, it's really important to stay with the same company for a long period of time, and it's frowned upon to jump around every 1 or 2 years. The reality is cost of living is going up, and your current employer is not necessarily willing or able to match that. And those pressures tend to put strain on the current workforce, this current generation, and put them in a position where they feel like they have to leave an organization, go elsewhere, and make the money that they feel like they deserve in public health, which you kind of got to do what you got to do, if you know what I mean. Now, the best time to job search and the best time to look for opportunities that will pay you what you feel like you deserve or match your worth is when you're already in a position working and earning a living, in that you can be a little bit more intentional, you can do the right amount of research to make the best informed decision as to what your next steps might be. And there's no better time to do that than when you are currently working and are not in a particular rush or pressure to leave that organization. Perhaps you're at the point now where you're dissatisfied and you're looking to make the next move. And it's important that at this point you take the time to understand what you're getting into if you leave your organization. Of course, the grass is not always greener on the other side. And even if you leave your current position for one that pays more on paper, perhaps there's things internally within that organization that serve as dissatisfaction factors that even if you went there to earn more money, you could potentially regret leaving the job that you just left. So do your research beyond just what the salary and the market position is. Potentially talk to people who work there, look at reviews on Glassdoor, and try to get other information that you can to understand that you're making the best decision when you consider salary and when you look at factors beyond the salary. So there's plenty of tools out there, and I won't go through all of them, that you can use that provide public information on these factors. Sunshine List is a good resource in Ontario, Canada specifically, for people who make more than $100,000 in the public sector. And it can show you the types of leadership positions and organizations that pay that amount, especially if you notice that the amounts are not in the job postings for those positions that you're looking for. You can see that play out in how salaries are reported for people with a wide range of experiences on the Sunshine List, for example. And then other tools that you can use are Glassdoor, that ask people to potentially self-report their earning, and they average it. And obviously, the more data points that are there, the more accurate that number might be. But sometimes an average can be a little bit deceiving. I tend to like a range better because on the low end of the range, usually that's for people who have the least amount of experience, and the high end of the range shows maybe what the high end is for someone who's very experienced. So average may not be as useful in all contexts, but the range might be a little bit more meaningful for you. The other factors that you should look at too in terms of knowing your worth is hybrid, remote work, right? You might have obligations in your life that make it very difficult to return back to the traditional work setup of being in the office 5 days a week. And maybe that's something that's important to you to consider alongside the salary, as well as flexible work days, flexible work hours, how the vacation time and benefits are structured, things like that you want to consider, and building into that overall package that you might feel inclined to leave for or not. And I say all of this to say is the more information that you have, the more likely you are to know your worth. And the more that you know and understand your worth, the better you're going to be able to negotiate confidently for that next opportunity. And that opportunity, the assumption here is that you're leaving your current organization because that's where you have the greatest power in terms of demanding what you're expecting to earn. Now, reach out to people in your circle. Maybe you're unfamiliar with negotiating. Maybe you're not comfortable. It's something that everybody should learn to be able to do, no matter what job or sector that you're in. The power of negotiating, because over time it can lead to things like resentment and regret when you find out that, hey, I could have asked for more because this person is less experienced than me. So don't leave it on the table, and understand that negotiating is a normal part of the recruitment. Understand that negotiating is a normal part of the recruitment process, much like an interview, resume, cover letter is. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you can lose a job by asking for too much money if you're measured and fair in what you're asking for based on what you're seeing in terms of patterns on the job market for that particular position. There are also very templated scripts and emails that you can search for on the internet and find. We might have shared a couple of them in previous episodes as well. If that's not something that you have experiencing, or if you're not as comfortable doing that, why recreate the wheel? People have done it. People have shared it. You can adapt it to your particular situation. And you also want to take note of the accomplishments that you have in your current job or previous jobs, because one angle of the negotiation discussion is, yes, I meet the requirements for education and I'm a regulated health provider, X number of years of experience, I exceed all of that. But you also, in a negotiation process, want to highlight some relevant accomplishments. And I find that if you don't do a good enough job making note of these while you're doing them, you tend to forget things when you need them in the moment. So please make sure you take note of your career accomplishments and your professional accomplishments and your work accomplishments as well. And then the overall theme of this whole episode is around protecting your psychological well-being by knowing when to move on. There's times when you've outgrown a position and there's other positions in the same organization that can provide you the level of challenge that you need to feel engaged. And there's times when the organization itself might not be the right place for you anymore, and being able to recognize that and make the next steps is key for your overall well-being and maintaining that sense of agency and maintaining that sense of power in being able to make decisions that are right for you. So those are some key undertones there, tying everything together. So anyways, that was a lot. These are some of the things that I think about. These are some conversations that I tend to have with a lot of different people, and I thought, let me just put it out there to see if it resonates with anyone. If this is something that resonates with you, would love to hear if this is something that you regularly think about, you struggle with, or maybe you're one of the persons in your circle that provides this kind of advice to your friends and to your colleagues. Would love to hear from you. There's instructions about how to get in touch with the Public Health Insight in the show notes or description of this particular episode at the very bottom. Don't hesitate, don't be shy, send us a message, and looking forward to having a chat with you next time. This is Gordon, finishing out. Peace. This show was edited by me, Gordon Thane, with additional editing from LaShawn Benedict. Sound design and mixing by myself and LaShawn Benedict. The original music from The Music Room, composed by Tom Fox, licensed from Johnny Harris. The cover art designed for our show by LaShawn Benedict. The Public Health Insight podcast is produced by PHI Media.
Thank you for listening to the Public Health Insight podcast, your go-to space for informative conversations, inspiring community action. If you enjoy our podcast, be sure to subscribe and leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. See you in the next one.